Russia has initiated an unannounced massive military exercise well ahead of its usual schedule. We're looking at 65,000 troops and over 200 mobile missile launchers moving into position. The naval component is just as heavy. 13 submarines have been deployed into the Baltic Sea, and 8 of them are strategic nuclear vessels. These maneuvers aren't happening in isolation. They are concentrated right against NATO's eastern flank, tracing the borders of Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania. This brings us to Kaliningrad. It's a highly dense Russian exclave cut off from the mainland, wedged entirely between NATO members. Recently, Lithuanian officials suggested NATO could easily level this territory, prompting Moscow to immediately dial up its nuclear posturing. The massive footprint and the proximity to the border suggest this is a physical demonstration of force, designed to answer Western pressure on Russia's most exposed territory. But the tension in the Baltics is tied to a specific recent event. A wave of drone strikes has managed to completely bypass Russian air defenses, hitting targets deep inside the country's borders. The targets weren't randomly chosen. They went straight for high-value economic infrastructure, specifically the Transneft oil depots and refineries in places like Ust-Luga and Primorsk. Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service, the SVR, is now claiming these drones didn't originate in Ukraine at all, but were launched from inside Latvia. Moscow has gone so far as to name 5 specific Latvian military bases they suspect are housing Ukrainian drone operators. The Adazhi base is right at the top of that list, and Russia is openly threatening retaliation against these locations. European leadership stepped in. Commission President Ursula von der Leyen called the threats to a member state entirely unacceptable, speaking for a unified EU pushback. By claiming Latvia is the actual launchpad, Moscow bypasses the proxy war framework. They are directly challenging NATO's territorial protections, walking right up to the edge of an Article 5 confrontation. This diagram shows the flight paths. Kyiv to Ust-Luga is a massive distance through guarded airspace. From the Latvian border, the distance drops significantly. The recovered drones are short-range models. They lack the capacity to fly from Ukraine, aligning with the Baltic launch. This logistical debate is happening right as the Karaganov Doctrine gains traction in Moscow. This is a growing political belief among Russian hardliners that a nuclear weapon must be detonated to remind the West of Russia's actual military capabilities. The truth of the drone launch site almost doesn't matter. The geographic claim itself gives Russian hardliners the exact justification they need to put their nuclear forces on high alert. Down on the actual battlefield, the timing of all this posturing aligns perfectly with the weather. We are moving out of the Rasputitsa, the notorious spring mud season. During the Rasputitsa season, the unpaved terrain completely turns into a thick sludge, making heavy armor movement nearly impossible. As late spring hits, that ground finally hardens, opening the window for major mechanized offensives. Russia has already suffered heavy logistical losses pushing supply convoys through this terrain. Entire columns have bogged down, stalling advances for weeks. With the ground finally clearing, Moscow is using the nuclear high alert to raise the stakes. By threatening escalation now, they aim to force a pause in military aid shipments just as their summer offensive begins. Ultimately, this posturing tests the actual limits of the NATO alliance. It forces policymakers in Washington to quietly ask themselves if they are genuinely prepared to risk a nuclear strike on an American city to defend a drone base in Riga. And Moscow isn't acting alone. Vladimir Putin recently touched down in Beijing, making sure the world sees his strongest partnership. Standing next to Chinese leadership while simultaneously running nuclear drills on Europe's border projects a very specific image of untouchability. The Kremlin is testing the durability of NATO's mutual defense treaties. They are betting that if the choice is between protecting a Latvian border post and avoiding a nuclear exchange, the West will ultimately choose self-preservation. There is also an audience across the Atlantic. As the U.S. election cycle heats up, the Kremlin is sending a loud, unwritten warning that continued support for Kyiv points straight toward nuclear escalation. By combining troop mobilizations with strategic accusations against Latvia, Russia is attempting to fracture European and American resolve. They're betting that the threat of the weapon will be enough to win the battle before the summer offensive even begins.